I was pouring my morning coffee when my son called from the lawyer's office. "Dad, it's time to hand everything over. We've got the papers ready." When I arrived, he slid a document across the table, my signature already on it, declaring me unfit to manage what I built. I felt the cut, deep and quiet, but I didn't raise my voice. I'd kept a leather notebook, copies of the real contracts, and a recording from the bank officer who caught their tricks. So I walked into court with my cane in one hand and that folder in the other. When I opened it, my daughter-in-law suddenly turned on him, and the judge leaned forward. "Want to hear how a father takes his name back? Stay with me to the end, and tell me the city you're watching from." Downtown Asheville felt smaller than usual that morning. The mountains sat blue at the rim of town while I eased my sedan into a tight space outside Kelling Associates. I wore the collared shirt Clara called my Sunday one and told myself this was clarification. No battles, only signatures I could understand. 40 years of work, a house we repaired board by board, investments tended like a garden. Surely the meeting would respect that. Inside, lemon cleaner and cold air met me. The receptionist smiled without using her eyes. I wrote my name, Oswald Harrington, on a sign-in sheet, and listened to a wall clock drop seconds like pebbles in a jar. I rehearsed calm questions, the way a man rehearses breathing before stepping into deep water. Keep the family steady. I had promised Clara. Keep dignity. Victor Kelling appeared with a handshake that felt damp. He guided me down a hallway of certificates into a glass-walled conference room. 2 chairs were already taken, Travis and Marla. My son didn't stand. He lounged as if the chair owed him comfort, one arm along the back like a landlord surveying an apartment. Marla's smile looked painted on. "Dad," Travis said, tone neutral as a bank notice. "Travis, Marla." I sat, set my hat beside me, and folded my hands. Victor shuffled papers, voice syrupy. "We're here to finalize certain transitions, streamlining, avoiding probate, keeping matters efficient." "I'll be reading everything," I said. Travis cut in. "No need to slow walk it. We've already agreed on the big picture." I had not. Before I could reply, he leaned forward and placed the point of the knife. "$33 million is mine," he said. "You're nothing." The room went quiet enough to hear the air vent hum. Victor didn't flinch. Marla's mouth twitched in approval, like someone pleased the weather matched the forecast. I kept my hands still because I decided they would be. I looked for the boy who once fell asleep on my shoulder after Little League. He was not here. "That's a bold claim," I said. "It's not a claim," he answered. "It's structure." Victor began a paragraph about trusts and efficiencies, words that turn people into columns. While he talked, I remembered Clara boxing sandwiches for Travis's class trip, remembered refinancing to cover a mistake he made at 24, remembered telling an officer I had been the one driving when he backed my truck into a pole. My chest didn't burn. It cooled, like steel left under rain. An assistant entered with refreshments. On the credenza, coffee in porcelain, iced water in heavy glass tumblers, lemon cookies on small plates. In front of me she set a flimsy plastic cup, the kind you keep near a dentist's sink. The others had glass that caught the light like crystal. "Sorry," she murmured to no one. I lifted the cup. It crackled. Across the table, Travis swirled his tumbler and smirked. No speech required. Message received. Guest in a house I built. "Victor," I said, setting the cup down. "Walk me through the documents." Slowly. "We can expedite," Travis said. "Dad, you don't need every line. I'm trustee. It's cleaner." "Cleaner for whom?" He sighed, performed impatience like a man checking his watch in church. "For all of us. Enjoy your porch. Let us handle the rest." Clara's voice rose in memory. "Dignity is a decision, Oz. When you can't choose the storm, choose your stance." I studied the city beyond the glass, dogwoods, tourists. The life that keeps moving even when yours stalls. I wasn't nothing. I was the man who taught this boy to count change, to write thank you notes, to tie a tie on Easter morning. "Excuse me," I said, standing. "Restroom." Victor pointed down the hall. The door closed behind me with a seal. A framed print of the Biltmore hung crooked. I straightened it. Habit of a man who fixes what's tilted. In the reflection, I saw an older face, lined but not weak. I breathed in, out. I wasn't angry. I was awake. Voices leaked through the seam of the door, paper against paper. Marla's whisper, Victor's phrasings. Then my son, clear and low. Make sure he signs. He's too old to fight back. I looked at the plastic cup in my hand and felt it flex. If they expected an old man to crumble, they misread the man. War can be loud. It can also be quiet and precise. I lifted my shoulders to their proper height, turned the knob, and walked back into the room with the posture my father taught me and my son forgot. I took my seat without touching the pen. Line by line, I told Victor. And any page I don't understand goes back in the folder, untouched. The drive back from the lawyer's office felt longer than it had any right to be. Asheville's streets were familiar, yet that morning they seemed to stretch endlessly, each traffic light pausing only to replay my son's words in my head. 33 million is mine. You're nothing. The phrase clung to the corners of my thoughts, echoing as if Travis were sitting beside me, whispering it again and again just to see if it would finally break me. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, my hands steady on the wheel, refusing to let the tremor inside reach the surface. Clara's voice surfaced in memory, calm and firm. Dignity is a choice. Oz. That was my mantra as I steered through town. Yet I couldn't shake the sting. No need for Dad. I gripped the wheel tighter, silently promising myself that if they thought I was too old to fight, they were about to learn otherwise. When I pulled into Travis's driveway later that afternoon, the house stood like a fortress, brick walls, tall hedges, the kind of place that projected permanence. I had built part of that stability for him, though he'd forgotten. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and Marla's perfume. I waited in the foyer while she fetched something from the kitchen, my eyes wandering the hallway lined with photographs. That's when I saw it, the family portrait from 2 summers ago, when we all gathered in the backyard for Clara's memorial service. Everyone was there. Travis, Marla, little Jonas perched on his father's shoulders, and where I once stood at the edge of that group, there was now only a neat cut. My body sliced out as if I'd never belonged. The frame had been rehung with precision, the gap almost invisible unless you knew what was missing. I leaned closer, heart thudding, my face, my presence, my history, erased with a pair of scissors. The longer I stared, the more the silence pressed down. It wasn't just paperwork at an office, not just a smirk across a conference table. This was deeper. My own son was trimming me out of his life the way a gardener prunes dead branches, except I wasn't dead. My pulse reminded me of that with every throb in my ears. Clara's words echoed again. Family is built on respect. I whispered back under my breath, and torn apart without it. Marla reappeared, carrying a tray of iced tea. Thirsty? She asked sweetly, as if nothing in the world were amiss. I shook my head. She set the glasses down, her nails clicking lightly against the surface. Travis came down the stairs, tie loosened, eyes glinting with that same cold certainty I'd seen in the lawyer's office. They chatted about dinner plans, baseball schedules for Jonas. As if I weren't standing there unraveling, I excused myself, muttering about needing air, and headed for the door. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft but sharp enough to pierce the air. Marla leaned toward Travis, her hand brushing his arm. He's already irrelevant. Don't worry. The words cut clean, more precise than any knife. I froze, one hand on the doorknob, back turned so they wouldn't see my face. Irrelevant. A word meant for things past their usefulness. A broken tool. A law repealed. A man forgotten. I inhaled, steady and deep, forcing myself not to storm back in. Instead, I let the word lodge inside me, an ember ready to burn. As I walked to my car, Clara's voice joined me again, steady as always. Respect. Oz. Without it, nothing stands. I tightened my jaw. If they thought erasing me from pictures and whispers could undo a lifetime of sacrifice, They had underestimated the wrong man. By the time I reached my estate, the evening sun was painting long shadows across the driveway. The house greeted me with silence, a far cry from the years when laughter and footsteps filled these halls. I stepped inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and paused. Every corner carried a memory. Jonas chasing a toy car, Travis and I patching a leak together, Clara humming in the kitchen, the weight of what had been pressed against what was. I sat in my chair by the window, staring at the hills rolling beyond, and let the anger settle into resolve. They think I won't fight back, I said aloud to the empty room. They're wrong. My voice sounded older than I felt, but it carried steel. I pulled the mail from the table, flipping through bills and newsletters until a thick envelope caught my eye. An invitation, elegant cardstock, gold lettering, the upcoming family gala. I scanned the list of honored guests. Names stacked in tidy lines. Travis and Marla Bledsoe. Jonas Bledsoe. But nowhere did Oswald Harrington appear. My hand trembled as I held the paper closer. I wasn't invited. My own name had been scrubbed from the celebration of a legacy I had built. For the first time that day, I laughed. Not loud, but enough to echo off the empty walls. If exclusion was their strategy, they had just lit the fuse. They wanted me invisible. They would soon learn I knew how to make myself impossible to ignore. The invitation sat heavy in my hand, its weight more symbolic than physical. Gold lettering on cream cardstock, every detail chosen to exude elegance. I flipped it open, scanning through the list of honored guests. My eyes moved slowly, deliberately, until the truth stared back at me. Travis Harrington, Marla Harrington, their son, Jonas, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in decades. But not me. My name was absent, as though the ink itself had conspired to forget me. A chill slid down my spine, not from surprise, but from confirmation. They wanted me erased, not only in court, but in memory. I set the card down on my desk beside the empty plastic cup I'd kept from the lawyer's office. For a moment, the house hummed with silence, the kind only old places know, walls that had listened to too many confessions and too many regrets. My reflection in the window looked older than I felt, but my resolve was sharp. If they think I won't show up, I muttered. They've underestimated me. Clara's voice returned in memory. Dignity is never given. Oswald, it's defended, and so I would defend it, even if the battlefield was a gala dinner instead of a courtroom. The evening of the gala came cloaked in summer warmth. The hotel ballroom sparkled under chandeliers, polished marble floors reflecting every flash of sequins and tuxedos. As I walked in, conversations dimmed for a breath, then resumed, louder, as if to cover my presence. A young attendant glanced at my ticket, her smile flickering before she directed me toward the far end of the hall. My seat wasn't near the center, not even close to the head table. Instead, they had placed me by the entrance, at the edge of the celebration, where the smell of cold drafts and kitchen doors lingered. I sat down quietly, my chair wobbling slightly against the uneven floor. From here, I could see Travis at the head table, Marla beside him, both glowing under the warm lights. They clinked glasses with board members, laughed at jokes whispered too softly for me to hear, and basked in attention I once commanded. A waiter passed by, offering wine. Travis's glass was crystal, mine, a plain tumbler that clinked dully against the table. The humiliation was deliberate. They wanted me not only removed from the spotlight but seated in shadow, visible enough to witness my own downfall. A man across from me cleared his throat. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Oswald," he said, not unkindly, but with the tone of someone already briefed on my diminished role. I forced a polite smile. "Family gathers. I show up," I replied. My words carried steel, but inside I felt the sting, how quickly respect evaporates when others believe your power has slipped. The speeches began. Travis stood, his voice steady, practiced, carrying across the hall. Tonight, we honor the strength of family and the legacy of perseverance, he announced. Applause rippled through the room. I clapped once, slow and deliberate. The sound of one man reminding himself he still had hands, still had a voice. Yet even as the crowd cheered, my gaze locked on the glittering head table. And I understood. This wasn't a dinner. It was theater, staged to present a new order where I no longer belonged. When dessert was served, I slipped away, unwilling to sit through another round of toasts that twisted the word family into something hollow. My coat hung in the cloakroom, heavier than I remembered. As I reached inside the pocket, my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. An envelope, worn at the edges, folded neatly but aged with time. My chest tightened as I pulled it out and saw Clara's handwriting. Delicate, yet unmistakable. Hands trembling, I unfolded the paper. Her words spilled out. Written years ago, yet perfectly timed for tonight. Oswald, if you're reading this, it means you've faced what we always feared, the hunger for wealth pulling our family apart. Remember, strength is not measured in what they take from you, but in what you refuse to surrender. Guard your dignity. Guard our name. Do not let greed erase the love we built. Tears blurred the ink for a moment. It was as though Clara stood beside me, whispering courage into my ear. The shame from the dinner dissolved into something sturdier, a quiet power rising from within. They could strip me from photos, seat me by the door, speak about legacy as though I were already gone. But Clara's words reminded me that erasure was only complete if I agreed to vanish. By the time I returned home, the night had deepened into silence, the estate wrapped in shadows. I placed Clara's letter gently on my desk, right beside the cheap plastic cup from the lawyer's office. 2 tokens, one of dismissal, one of defiance. I leaned back in my chair, staring at them both, and whispered into the quiet, "They want me invisible. Clara would never let me fade away, and I won't." Resolve hardened in me like stone. The humiliation of that night was not the end. It was the beginning. I knew then that every insult, every act of disrespect would be recorded, remembered, and eventually answered. Clara had left me the words I needed, and I would use them as a weapon sharper than any blade. The morning after the gala, I sat at my desk with Clara's letter spread open beside me. The cheap plastic cup from the lawyer's office sat on the other side, a silent reminder of the humiliation they had dealt me. Between those 2 objects, I placed a leather-bound notebook I had found in the study. Its cover was cracked from years of disuse, but the pages were untouched. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt clarity. If they wanted me invisible, then I would leave behind a record so complete that no one could erase it. I uncapped my pen and began writing, line by line, every slight, every word of disrespect, every look meant to diminish me. "Lawyer's office," I scribbled. "Travis, you're nothing." Plastic cup, gala, seat by the door, name erased. My hand moved slowly, deliberately. The words steadied me. Clara always said, "Truth is the strongest defense you'll ever hold." By writing it, I wasn't just preserving memory, I was forging evidence. Each page became both shield and weapon, something that could outlive their manipulation. By noon, I closed the book and slid it into the top drawer of my desk. I leaned back, looking out over the quiet garden where Clara once tended her roses. "This isn't just for me," I whispered. "This is for her." Later that week, I drove to Travis's house. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass, children's voices echoing faintly from the backyard. I rang the bell, and Marla opened the door, her smile as sharp as glass. "Oh," she said, drawing out the word. "It's you." Travis appeared behind her, jacket slung casually over his shoulder. "Dad, what's this about? You didn't call." "I don't need an appointment to see my own son," I replied, stepping inside. The house gleamed with money I had helped build, polished hardwood, expensive art on the walls, furniture too pristine to ever feel like home. We sat in the living room, Marla curling into an armchair, Travis dropping onto the couch with a sigh. I stayed standing. I began, voice firm. Because what you did at the gala was an insult not just to me, but to everything I've built for this family. You pushed me to the margins like I was a stranger. Travis raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Dad, you're reading too much into it. The seating was random. Don't make drama where there isn't any. Random? My tone cut through the air. My name was missing from the program. My seat was shoved by the door. That's no accident. Marla smirked, resting her chin on her hand. Maybe it's time people stop pretending the past matters as much as it does. Legacy is a young man's game now. I turned to her, anger sparking. You sit there enjoying a fortune built by my sweat and Clara's sacrifices, and you talk of legacy like it's a toy. Respect is not a game, Marla. Travis waved a dismissive hand. Dad, calm down. You're overreacting. You're retired. Enjoy it. Let me handle things now. Handle things? I leaned forward, my voice low. You're dismantling everything. I won't stand by while you spit on the foundation Clara and I laid. The room went tense. For a moment, even Travis's confidence faltered. Then he shrugged. Believe what you want. Just don't come into my home accusing me. I straightened, meeting his eyes. You may ignore me today, Travis, but remember this. Respect can be withdrawn as easily as it's given, and when it's gone, so is trust. I left before either of them could reply, Marla's quiet laugh following me out the door. The next morning, I found myself outside Victor Kelling's office again. The building looked smaller than before, less imposing, though maybe it was I who had changed. Inside, Victor greeted me with that polished smile that never reached his eyes. Oswald, what a surprise. Twice in 1 month. I'm honored. I didn't sit. I want clarity, I said. I suspect documents have been altered, agreements I signed, terms I never agreed to. You will explain them to me. Victor steepled his fingers, leaning back. Now, family trusts are complicated. Transitions can feel confusing. Don't patronize me, I snapped. I know the difference between confusion and deceit. His lips curled into a thin line. Oswald, you've always been a proud man, but pride sometimes distorts perspective. Your son is the future. You should embrace that. I stepped closer, my voice cold. Do not twist this into a lesson. I built that future. And I know when my hand has been forged on paper. Victor adjusted his tie, still calm, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. All is in order, I assure you. You'll see, in time, that everything has been done in your best interest. Best interest. The words echoed like poison. I turned, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing my fury break. By the time I stepped outside, dusk had fallen, the streets dim under orange lamplight. I walked slowly, the city around me moving in hurried fragments, cars rushing, strangers brushing past, while I moved through a different current, one of betrayal and silent calculation. They would not hear my rage yet. No, they would feel the weight of my silence when the time came. As I reached the curb, I glanced back through the glass door. Victor was packing up his briefcase, but something caught my eye, a torn envelope sticking out from the side pocket. My signature, bold and unmistakable, was scrawled across it. That glimpse was enough. I knew then I was being erased not by accident, but by design. I barely slept after leaving Victor's office. That envelope with my signature had branded itself into my thoughts. I tossed and turned, replaying every paper I had ever signed in the last decade. Each moment of trust I had handed over to Travis or Victor returned to me as a question. Had it been twisted, bent to their will? By dawn, the house was quiet, the silence almost accusatory. I rose before the sun, poured black coffee into a chipped mug Clara once favored, and stood at the kitchen window as the first pale light reached the yard. My body was weary, But my mind had already made the decision. I needed to dig through my own archives, through every cabinet and drawer, until I knew exactly what had been tampered with. They wanted me blind. I would open my eyes wider than ever. By mid-morning, I was in the study, that old paneled room where Clara once played the piano and where I kept decades of files. The smell of cedar mixed with dust as I opened drawer after drawer. At first, everything appeared orderly, but then I noticed it, an empty folder where my 2018 property deeds should have been. My pulse tightened. I pulled open another drawer, rifled through estate plans, and froze. A contract from last year sat on top, but the language was different than I remembered. I held it up against the light, scanning the fine print. The clause naming me primary trustee was gone, replaced with Travis's name, typed neatly as if it had always been there. My hand shook, not from age but from rage. Someone had been in my house, in this very room, altering the life I had built. I thought of Marla immediately, her sneers, her cold remarks, her presence at every meeting where my voice was ignored. It wasn't just Travis. She had her fingerprints all over this. I paced the study, papers spread across the desk like battlefield maps. Each discrepancy, each missing file, was a bullet aimed at me. The walls of the room felt smaller, the air thinner, as if the house itself knew betrayal had entered. I gathered what I could, tucking altered contracts into a folder. My suspicion had shifted into certainty. They weren't careless. They were deliberate. That evening, I went to dinner at Travis's home. It was supposed to be a family meal, but I carried my folder under my arm like a soldier with his weapon. The table gleamed with polished silverware, wine glasses lined perfectly, candles casting a soft glow. Marla's laugh echoed before I even stepped into the dining room. "Well, look who decided to join us," she said, her eyes narrowing with false sweetness. I took my seat, laying the folder beside me. Travis raised his glass. "To family," he said, as though mocking me. I didn't touch mine. Halfway through the meal, I opened the folder and slid one of the altered contracts onto the table. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice calm but cutting. Travis frowned, glancing at the paper. "Dad, what is this?" "You know exactly what it is," I snapped. "A contract with my name erased, replaced with yours, and it was taken from my study. My study. Travis, do you break into your father's house now to steal what's left of his dignity?" The room went still. Marla set down her fork slowly, then leaned back with a smirk. "You sound paranoid. Oswald, maybe you're confused. Old papers can be messy. Memory fades." "Memory doesn't fade like ink," I said sharply. "This was altered, and you know it." Travis shook his head, irritation flickering. "Dad, this is exactly what I warned you about. You're seeing slights everywhere. You've convinced yourself there's a conspiracy when all we're doing is taking care of things you can't handle anymore." The words lit a fire in me. I slammed my palm against the table. "Don't you dare speak to me like that. You think I don't know what you're doing? You want me erased from the business, from the family, from memory itself. But hear me clearly. I will not go quietly." The clatter of silverware rang in the silence that followed. Even the servants in the next room seemed to freeze. Marla arched an eyebrow. "So dramatic," she said coldly. "If you can't accept change, maybe it's better you step aside." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Better people than you have tried to push me aside. Clara stood by me through wars of business, family feuds, and hardships you couldn't begin to imagine. I am still standing. And I will not step aside for greed wearing the mask of family." The rest of the meal was eaten in silence, tension thick as smoke. When I left, I carried not just my folder but a fury I could no longer contain. Back at the estate, I walked into the parlor where Clara's portrait hung above the fireplace. The candlelight flickered across her painted smile. I spoke aloud, voice trembling not from weakness but from the weight of what I carried. "Clara, they're trying to erase me, but I swear to you, I will defend what we built. They won't succeed, not while I breathe." Her eyes, even in paint, seemed to steady me. A lighthouse in the storm. Later that night, As I passed the dining room again, I caught a sound. Travis's voice. I froze. Listening, he was on the phone, speaking low, but the words carried. Yes, Victor. He suspects something. No, don't worry. He won't even see it coming. The chill in his tone hit me harder than any insult he had spoken to my face. They weren't stumbling into mistakes. They were planning, step by step, and I was their target. The morning after that dinner, I rose with the taste of bitterness still thick in my mouth. I had heard Travis's words clearly, his quiet threat still echoing. He won't even see it coming. I knew exactly what that meant. They were planning the next strike, and it wouldn't be a subtle one. So, I dressed with purpose. Pulling on the navy blazer Clara once said made me look like a man of consequence, and I headed straight for Victor Kelling's office downtown. The high-rise building towered above the Houston skyline, glass glinting in the sunlight like a blade. Walking through the lobby, I caught sight of my reflection in the marble floor. Older, yes, but not defeated. By the time I stepped off the elevator, my hands were steady. Victor greeted me with a smile too polished, too rehearsed. "Oswald," he said, voice dripping with counterfeit warmth. "Always good to see you." I didn't sit immediately. I let the silence stretch until he gestured to the chair across from him. Minutes later, Travis strolled in, wearing that same smug confidence I'd come to despise, as if the outcome of this meeting was already decided. Victor wasted no time. He slid a thick folder across the sleek mahogany desk. The city sprawled behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Here we are," he said smoothly. "The finalized estate plan, everything in order, as you instructed." I flipped it open, and there it was, my signature, crisp and clean, on a document that handed everything to Travis. My jaw clenched. "I never signed this," I said, my voice flat. Travis leaned back, crossing his arms. "Dad, come on. That's your handwriting. That's your decision. You wanted to take care of me. Make sure the business stayed strong. You said it yourself. You're too tired for all this." I looked at him steadily. "I said no such thing. And if you believe for a second I'll let this forgery stand, you're more foolish than I thought." Victor interjected, his tone carefully neutral. "Oswald, misunderstandings happen. Documents evolve. The intent was always to secure the future." "Intent?" I shot back. "Intent doesn't forge signatures. Intent doesn't erase a man from his own legacy." The room tightened with tension. Travis smirked, but I saw his eyes flicker. Just for a moment. That was enough for me. I reached into my leather case and laid down copies of older documents, contracts, wills, estate plans, each one authentic, each one naming me as the authority. I pushed them across the desk. "Explain the contradictions," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. "Because last I checked, forging signatures isn't just immoral, it's criminal." Travis laughed, though the sound rang hollow. "Listen to yourself. You sound paranoid, Dad, an old man clinging to paper when the world's already moved on." But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "If you think my age makes me weak, you're mistaking silence for surrender, and that will be your mistake, not mine." Just then, the door opened. Elena Vargas, a bank officer I'd known in passing, stepped in holding a slim folder. "Apologies, Victor," she said politely, "but these needed to be delivered immediately." She handed him the papers, then caught my eye. Her expression was brief but clear, a flicker of concern. As she left, she murmured low enough for only me to hear. "Mr. Harrington, there was a withdrawal attempt yesterday. Unusual, by Mrs. Marla Denton. Denied for irregularities." I nodded, hiding my surprise. A sliver of validation surged through me. They weren't as careful as they thought, and I wasn't as alone as they imagined. The office felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Victor set down Elena's papers with deliberate calm. Travis leaned across the desk, eyes sharp. "Fight us if you want, but you'll regret it. You think the law is on your side. You won't survive the humiliation." Victor added, his voice like oil on water. "Oswald, step aside. Do it quietly, with dignity. There's no need for this to get unpleasant. I rose slowly, gathering my documents. Unpleasant, I repeated. You think this is unpleasant now? You haven't begun to feel unpleasant. I buttoned my blazer, steadying myself. I built this legacy with my own hands, and if you think I'll let you dismantle it with lies, you're in for a war you're not prepared to fight. I turned and walked toward the door, each step deliberate, each one fueled by resolve. My fists were clenched, not from fear, but from the fire of determination. They had shown me their trap. Now I knew how to spring it back on them. As I reached the hallway, just before the door shut behind me, I heard Victor's voice drop low, sharp as glass. Phase 2 begins tonight. The words froze me mid-step. This wasn't just about contracts or money anymore. They were planning something deeper, something darker. And for the first time, I realized they weren't just trying to erase me from the business. They wanted me erased, period. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, the grandfather clock ticking too loudly in the corner, its chimes marking every long, heavy hour. Victor's words echoed over and over. Phase 2 begins tonight. What was Phase 2? What more could they do after forging my name, trying to erase me from my own legacy? The lamp on my desk cast a circle of light over Claire's photograph. I found myself staring at it, drawing strength from the steadiness in her eyes. The house was too quiet, each creak in the wood making me glance toward the door. I half expected someone to step through it. Instead, I was left with my thoughts, and the realization that the battle wasn't just legal, it was personal, and it was accelerating. By dawn, my resolve had hardened. I would not give them the satisfaction of breaking me in silence. Early that morning, a package arrived. I thought it might be routine mail, but the thick envelope bore no return address. Inside, I found photographs, grainy, obviously tampered with, but convincing enough to raise doubts, images of me at casinos I hadn't visited, checks written in my name to strangers I had never met, even supposed records of reckless spending that painted me as a man spiraling out of control. My breath caught as I flipped through them, the humiliation striking deeper with each page. I could already hear the whispers they wanted to stir. The old man's lost it. He can't be trusted anymore. Within hours, the whispers spread. A neighbor called to ask if I was all right, her tone hesitant, as if she didn't want to accuse me directly. I heard some things, Oswald, she said, about your choices. I thanked her curtly and hung up, my hand trembling not with weakness but with anger. Travis was moving fast, faster than I had expected. He wasn't content to corner me in the family circle. He wanted to poison the whole community against me. That evening, I went to the church meeting, a place that had always been my anchor. The church hall was filled with neighbors, folks I'd known for decades. But the air felt different. Conversations quieted as I walked in, eyes flicking toward me before quickly looking away. And then Travis stood, tall and confident, as if he belonged at the pulpit. He didn't accuse me directly. No, that would have been too bold. Instead, he spoke of concerns, of how sometimes age brings confusion, how we all must look after those who may not be able to manage things anymore. Every word was a dagger disguised as compassion. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to shout. Darrell Whitlock, my neighbor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I caught his eye, saw the flicker of recognition. He knew what Travis was doing, but he stayed silent, trapped by the weight of the moment. When Travis finished, the room buzzed with uneasy murmurs. I forced myself to stand calmly, to look every one of them in the eye. I appreciate your concern, I said evenly, but let me assure you, I am very much in control of my affairs. Don't let whispers replace truth. My voice held steady, though inside I burned with fury. To lash out would only make me look unstable, exactly what Travis wanted. Back home, I went straight to my desk. I pulled out the leather notebook and began documenting everything, the forged photos, the whispers at church, every insult and slight, page after page. I laid it all down, Evidence for the day when truth would have to stand against lies. I locked the notebook in my desk drawer and sat back, exhausted. Clara's words came to me again, words she had written in that letter I'd found at the gala. Dignity is not given, it is defended. By the fireplace, with only the crackle of flames for company, I whispered into the stillness. If they want war, they'll have it, but it'll be on my terms. The oath settled deep in me, a quiet promise that steadied my heart even as the storm raged louder outside. I thought the night might finally bring rest, but I was wrong. Near midnight, the crash of shattering glass jolted me upright. My study window was broken, shards glittering on the rug. A rock lay among the pieces, tied with a note scrawled in harsh, hurried letters. Stay quiet, or else. I held the note in my hands, feeling the edges bite into my skin. It was no longer just betrayal, it was a threat. They had crossed into something darker, something far more dangerous. And as I stood there in the dim light, I realized the fight for my name had become a fight for my very life. I stood in the study, staring at the shards of glass scattered across the rug. The note tied to the rock still rested on my desk, its scrawled threat ringing louder in my mind than the wind whistling through the broken window. Stay quiet, or else. They had crossed a line tonight. This was no longer a struggle hidden in legal offices or whispered in church halls. This was war in plain sight. My chest tightened, but not from fear. Determination coursed through me. If they wanted to intimidate me, they had underestimated just how much I had left to fight. By the time the sun broke the horizon, I knew exactly what I had to do. I would face them all under my own roof, and I would not back down. The following evening, I summoned them. Travis and Marla arrived first, stepping into my home as though it already belonged to them. Marla's smirk barely hid her contempt. Travis didn't bother to mask his arrogance. Victor Kelling arrived shortly after, briefcase in hand, his polished smile radiating the false comfort of a man who thought he still held the upper hand. Word spread quickly, as I intended, and soon a few neighbors lingered near the open doorway, among them Darrell Whitlock. They pretended curiosity, but I knew they sensed something more, scandal brewing in the heart of the Harrington estate. I remained standing at the head of the dining table, the portraits of ancestors gazing down from the walls as though they too demanded justice. Thank you all for coming, I said, voice steady. Tonight, the charade ends. The silence that followed was suffocating. I saw Marla exchange a glance with Travis, both expecting me to concede, to admit weakness, but instead, I reached into my jacket and laid a small recorder on the table. A faint click, and her own voice filled the room. Marla's words, recorded in a careless moment, confessing how she had arranged withdrawals without my knowledge. Gasps erupted. Marla shot up, her chair screeching across the floor. "That's not real," she cried, her face pale, but Elena Vargas, who had slipped in behind the neighbors with a folder in hand, stepped forward. Calmly, she confirmed the suspicious transactions, her professional tone slicing through Marla's denial. The air snapped with tension. Travis slammed his palm on the table. "You're manipulating everyone! Father twisting lies to make yourself look like a victim!" His voice cracked with rage, but I saw the tremor in his hand. For the first time, he realized the foundation under him wasn't as solid as he believed. I turned my gaze on Victor. "And as for you, counselor," I said evenly, "I didn't come unprepared. From the desk drawer, I pulled a folder of my own, authentic documents I had secured long before. I spread them across the table, each one contradicting the forged versions Victor had tried to pass off. His calm mask faltered, lips twitching as the color drained from his face. "Forgery is a crime, Victor," I said quietly. But the weight of the room pressed the words into everyone's ears. Even in Texas, with all your friends in high places, you can't wash this away. The neighbors began whispering, the scandal now public, impossible to contain. Marla's denial turned to sobs. Travis's anger boiled into curses, and Victor's confidence crumbled with every passing second. Chaos swirled in my dining room, but I stood tall. the steadiness of Clara's memory bracing me like an unseen hand on my shoulder. "Enough," I said, my voice rising above the noise. The room froze. "I built this family's name. I carried its weight when none of you were there, and I will not be erased, not by greed, not by lies, and not by intimidation." My chest heaved, but not from exhaustion. For the first time in months, I felt fully alive, fully present, unshaken by their games. Travis pushed back his chair so hard it nearly toppled. His face twisted with rage as he pointed a shaking finger at me. "If I can't have it," he shouted, "nobody will." His words cut through the silence, a vow as dangerous as it was reckless. He stormed out, the door slamming against the frame. The others scrambled after him, leaving the neighbors stunned, murmuring among themselves as they filed out into the night. I stood in the quiet aftermath, the echoes of his threat hanging in the air, and in that moment, I knew this fight wasn't over. It was only getting darker. The morning sun spilled across Houston with the kind of warmth that usually carried comfort, but that day it only sharpened the sting of humiliation. Word had spread overnight. Neighbors whispered at their fences, voices lowered but not low enough to keep me from hearing the echoes. As I walked into town, I felt their eyes on me, some sympathetic, others filled with curiosity, all of them carrying fragments of last night's storm. I kept my head high, each step deliberate, though inside me humiliation and resilience fought for dominance. The confrontation had left scars deeper than the broken glass in my study window, and now every nod from a passerby carried the weight of pity I didn't ask for. It didn't take long for Travis to show his true colors. By midday, I found him standing outside the courthouse steps. A small crowd gathered as though he were delivering a sermon. His voice rang out with anger I had only heard in private before. "My father is spreading lies," he declared, finger-stabbing the air for emphasis. "He's trying to tarnish my name because he's bitter, confused, and losing his mind." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood at the edge, my fists clenched, resisting the urge to step forward. I didn't need to. Travis was undoing himself. His fury, uncontrolled and raw, cracked the polished image he had spent years polishing. I saw neighbors exchange uneasy looks, their memories of his arrogance and sudden wealth aligning with the doubts now growing in their minds. Marla made her move later that afternoon. I had suspected she wouldn't stay quiet, and sure enough, I spotted her meeting Elena Vargas outside the bank. Their voices carried farther than they realized. "You can take this," Marla whispered urgently, pressing an envelope forward. "No one needs to know. Just change your story. Say you misunderstood." Elena stepped back, her posture firm, her voice unwavering. "No amount of money will erase the truth," she said. "You crossed the line, Marla, and I won't be part of your deception." From where I stood, hidden across the street, pride welled up in me, not for the exposure of Marla's desperation, but for Elena's integrity. It reminded me of Clara, her unwavering insistence that dignity was worth more than gold. The sight stung, though, because I knew Clara would have been heartbroken to see our family dragged this low. That evening, back in the quiet of my home, I sat beneath Clara's portrait. The shadows stretched across the room as the day gave way to night, and I let my thoughts unravel. I had won a small measure of vindication, but it came at the price of seeing my own blood unravel in public shame. I pressed my hand against the wooden frame of Clara's picture, whispering as though she could hear me. "Your words still guide me, love, even now, when everything feels poisoned." My pain didn't vanish, but it shifted, turning slowly into something firmer, strength drawn from the same well of endurance Clara had carried in her heart. The next days brought whispers I hadn't expected. Word spread that Victor Kelling might face legal scrutiny for the forged documents. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones outside the diner, rumors circling like hawks. For the first time, I wasn't the one under the heaviest suspicion. Some in the community began approaching me quietly, offering nods of support, words of encouragement. One elderly couple pressed my hand and said, "We believe you." It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it was enough. Cracks had formed in the wall Travis had built around himself, and I saw the first signs of his control slipping. Yet the fracture came with its own cost. That evening, as the house settled into silence, I found an envelope slipped beneath my door. No name. No return address. Just weight. Thick with intent. Inside, I unfolded copies of legal complaints. Crisp pages marked with my own name as the defendant. My chest tightened as I read the accusations. Financial mismanagement, neglect, incompetence. Lies dressed in the cold language of the court. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands, realizing the whispers had taken form. The battle had shifted from gossip and threats to the unforgiving theater of law. The envelope lay heavy in my hands, as though the paper itself carried the weight of betrayal. I unfolded each page slowly, my eyes dragging over words I never thought I would see attached to my own name. Legal claims, petitions, accusations of incompetence and mismanagement, all designed to strip me of authority over the estate I had built with decades of sacrifice. Fear stabbed through me first, sharp, cold, but it quickly tangled with disbelief. How could my own son drag me into court like an enemy? Clara's voice echoed faintly in my memory. Family should be your fortress. Yet here I was, staring at papers that declared war, drafted by those who should have been my shield. The style of the documents gave away the hand that crafted them. Victor Kelling. His sentences were precise, sharp as a scalpel, every phrase constructed to cut me down and bleed away my credibility. He hadn't just betrayed me in whispers and half-truths. Now it was carved in legal ink. Reading through his cold language, I realized it wasn't only Travis turning against me. It was the very system I had trusted all my life, manipulated by a man I once shook hands with, believing his word held honor. The betrayal from Victor carried its own sting, quieter but more corrosive. It made me understand that this battle wasn't going to be fought in dining rooms or family gatherings anymore. It had shifted to the sterile, merciless halls of the courthouse. As the day wore on, my phone rang, Travis's number flashing across the screen. I hesitated but answered, bracing myself. His voice came smooth at first, then sharpened into arrogance. "Dad," he said, almost mockingly, "I hope you read the filings. This isn't personal, it's business. The law is on my side now. This is checkmate." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles burned. "Checkmate?" I spat back. "You think this is a game of chess? Boy, you're tearing apart your own family." He laughed, a sound I hardly recognized. "Families change. Power shifts. You had your time. Now it's mine." When the call ended, I nearly collapsed into the chair behind me. My own son, the boy I had raised, was now my executioner. His weapon not fists or words, but the machinery of law. That evening, as the weight pressed heavier on me, Elena Vargas knocked at my door. She stepped inside with a quiet presence, her eyes carrying a strength that steadied me. She had seen too much already, Marla's schemes, Victor's manipulations, and yet she had stood her ground when others would have faltered. Sitting across from me, she spoke gently but firmly. "Oswald, you cannot let them strip you of what you built. Clara wouldn't have. And Jonas deserves to know his grandfather fought for more than money. He fought for truth." Her words pierced through the fog of sorrow. For the first time since opening that cursed envelope, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not joy, but resolve beginning to take root. Elena's reminder of Clara's strength anchored me, pulling me back from despair. Through the night, I began my own work. I pulled out old files, receipts, letters Clara had written me, even simple notes she had left tucked in drawers. Each piece was a fragment of truth, proof of the life I had lived honestly, proof of the foundation I had laid for this family. I laid them out across the desk like weapons being sharpened for battle, bank slips, witness accounts, memories turned to evidence. If they wanted a war in court, then I would not walk in empty-handed. I would bring every shred of truth with me, even if it meant dragging ghosts into the witness stand. My reflection in the window stared back at me. Weary but unbroken, I whispered to that reflection, If they want war, I'll give them the truth of my life. That's something no forged paper can erase. Just when I thought the night would settle into silence, another envelope appeared, slipped under my door without a sound. I tore it open, expecting another stack of accusations, but instead found a single sheet with 5 words scrawled across it. Trust no one, not even those closest. My heart pounded. The message was unsigned, the handwriting unfamiliar, but the warning rang louder than anything I had faced yet. Betrayal had already seeped into my home like poison. Was there more to come? I sat back in my chair, the note trembling in my hands, realizing that the legal storm was only the beginning. The war ahead would not just be against my son and his allies, it might very well consume everyone around me. The cryptic note lay on my desk, its short message burning into my thoughts as if the ink had been seared there by fire. Trust no one, not even those closest. I sat in the dim glow of the lamp, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a noose. The words echoed louder than the ticking clock on the wall, louder even than the memory of Travis's mocking voice on the phone. My mind searched every face I'd seen these last few days, every kind word spoken to me, and twisted them into shadows of doubt. Who had slipped this warning under my door? Was it meant to protect me? Or was it another trick to fracture what little strength I had left? The room seemed smaller with every breath, suspicion tightening the walls. I found myself retracing every recent conversation, turning them over as if they were stones hiding snakes. Elena's steady words replayed in my head, her encouragement, her loyalty. Yet the note forced me to wonder, was her loyalty genuine, or had I been blinded by my need for an ally? Daryl had stood at my side, offering sympathy when the community began whispering, but sympathy could be a mask. Even Jonas, innocent as he was, had been used before as a pawn in Travis's manipulations. The thought sickened me, but I couldn't dismiss it. The note had planted a seed, and seeds of suspicion sprout quickly when watered by betrayal. I wrestled with a cruel choice, to guard myself by doubting everyone, or risk losing the last few people who might still care for me. Over the next day, paranoia became my shadow. I noticed things I hadn't before. An unfamiliar car idled too long near the corner of my street, its windows dark, the engine running just enough to hum against the silence. When I picked up the phone, the line crackled faintly, as though someone else was listening in. I pressed the receiver tighter, speaking nonsense into it just to test if a reaction would follow. The air in my home no longer felt private, it felt watched. I asked myself if this was Victor tightening his grip, hiring eyes to track me, or if another hand was moving the pieces unseen. The fear burned hot in my chest, but so did determination. If they thought surveillance would frighten me into silence, they didn't understand the man Clara married. Still, I needed answers, and answers required risk. I began to test the waters, dropping small, misleading hints into my conversations. When Elena stopped by with groceries, I casually mentioned I might be meeting with an old friend who worked at the bank. I watched her carefully as I spoke. Her face revealed nothing but concern. Her words simple. Oswald, don't go alone. Let me know if you need me. Later, when Daryl walked me back from town, I told him I'd found a witness who could blow Victor's case apart. His brow furrowed, but he didn't press for details. I noted every gesture, every pause, weighing them against the warning in that note. And then there was Jonas, bounding into the room with a drawing clutched in his small hands. He had drawn the two of us standing side by side under a bright sun, my cane in one hand. His small figure beside me, I felt my chest tighten. In his innocence, he gave me something pure. Trust without condition. Trust untouched by scheming adults. That drawing became my anchor in the storm. Late that night, just as the house had settled into stillness, a knock sounded at the back door. It was soft, deliberate, and it froze me in place. No neighbor would call at this hour. I gripped the edge of the desk for balance before I walked toward the kitchen, the boards creaking under my feet. When I opened the door, no face greeted me, only a figure cloaked in shadow who quickly pressed an envelope into my hand before vanishing into the night without a word. My heart pounded as I tore it open, half expecting another vague threat. Instead, inside lay a more detailed message. It warned of a trap waiting in court, details already arranged to corner me regardless of what evidence I carried. The letter named no source, but its clarity sent a chill deeper than the first note. I sank into the chair again, clutching the envelope, the words blurring as my eyes burned. Paranoia reached its peak, but alongside it rose something else, unyielding determination. If betrayal waited for me, then I would walk into it with my eyes open. They could surround me with lies, stack the courtroom with falsehoods, even erode the trust of those I loved. But they could not take away the truth I carried within me, nor could they erase the years of sacrifice Clara and I had built this life upon. I whispered into the silence. If betrayal is near, then I must walk into it with eyes open. The house creaked as if answering, and I felt the weight of the coming battle settle onto my shoulders. The morning of the trial, I walked up the courthouse steps with a weight that pressed deeper than any burden I had carried before. The stone pillars loomed tall, and though my cane tapped steady against the pavement, my chest felt like it carried both lead and fire. Inside, the air was hushed but tense, as if the whole room knew the storm was about to break. Travis sat near the front with Marla at his side, their faces smug, rehearsed, almost rehearsed for victory. Victor Kelling leaned in toward them, whispering with the ease of a man who thought the outcome already sealed. The warning notes echoed in my mind. Trust no one, not even those closest. As I took my seat, my heart whispered, betrayal may wait within these walls. But so did my resolve. The proceedings began with Victor presenting a thick folder, his voice smooth, practiced. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Mr. Oswald Whitmore is unfit to manage his estate. This document bears his own acknowledgement. He slid forward what he believed to be his winning card, a forged statement painting me as unstable and reckless. For a moment, the courtroom leaned toward his side, whispers buzzing through the benches. I sat still, letting the performance play out. Then, with deliberate calm, I stood and produced my own folder, thicker and heavier, filled with months of quiet work. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled slightly. Before you is a lie, and here is the truth. Inside were bank slips signed by Marla, recordings of whispered admissions, and witness accounts Elena and Daryl had helped me gather. Gasps filled the chamber. The tide shifted sharply, Victor's polished mask flickering as the judge's eyes darkened. But before I could take in the relief, the air cracked with a deeper betrayal. Marla, clutching her purse as if it were a lifeline, suddenly stood. Her voice shook, but her words cut deeper than any blade. It wasn't him, she cried, pointing at Travis. It was Travis all along. He planned the withdrawals. He made me sign. He told Victor what to draft. You're nothing without me. For the first time, everyone saw him without the polished veneer, desperate, venomous, small. The judge's gavel pounded, demanding order. When silence finally settled, his ruling fell swift and sharp. Victor was disbarred on the spot, his legal career torn from him in front of the very clients he once manipulated. Travis's access to the estate was frozen, his claims struck down with finality. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunderclaps of justice delivered. I looked across the room at Travis, who now slumped in his chair, his arrogance drained into something resembling fear. For years, he had towered over me with threats and manipulation. But in that moment, he looked no larger than a boy caught in his own lie. Then, amid the heavy silence, Jonas entered the courtroom, brought forward by a neighbor who had watched over him. His small hand gripped mine, his innocent eyes softening the edges of all this ugliness. His presence reminded me what all of this truly meant. Not the money, not the pride, but the legacy. I rose slowly, steadying myself against the table, and spoke, not just to my family, but to everyone listening. Wealth means nothing if it destroys respect and love. A fortune cannot buy forgiveness. It cannot mend what greed has broken. My voice thickened, but I pressed on. Jonas will inherit not only what I've saved, but the lessons Clara and I lived by. He will know dignity, patience, and truth, not the hollow hunger for more. I looked at Marla, whose tears had carved lines through her painted face, and at Travis, whose fists clenched in defeat. Forgiveness may come in time, but trust, it is not demanded. It is earned. The murmurs of the crowd carried that truth further than my words alone could reach. As I stepped out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sun, I felt the weight of generations pressing both behind and before me. Clara's memory walked with me, Jonas's small hand anchored me, and the verdict sealed what I had fought for. They thought they had buried me under greed, but I rose, not for revenge alone, but to remind them that a father's worth is measured not in millions, but in the lessons he leaves behind.